This week on Boat Maintenance in 10 minutes or less, we're talking about checking something that's vitally important to your boat's structure. And you can use this information to make sure your boat is in ship shape, or when shopping for a boat and looking over one before you buy it. We're talking about what holds your keel on and why it might fail. There are a lot of different types of keel, and today we're talking about the production boat with no stub. Now, even if you have an older boat or something that this doesn't apply to, it's still very good information to have in your brain in case you find yourself helping someone who does have one of these. We see horror stories all the time about boats losing their keel, and more often than not, they're a Keel Matrix boat. And here's what that means. Back in the 60s and 70s, when we started building boats from fiberglass, a lot of them were full keel, like the Carl Alberg boats. The hull and keel are all one piece, we call it encapsulated, and the ballast or keel weight was just poured into the hull after it was made. These keels don't fall off because they're part of the hull. Then we got into modified fins, where they were still fairly long and fat, but no longer the full length of the hull, like a full keel, and a lot of these were bolted on, like mine is. But it doesn't bolt onto a flat bottom of the hull. It bolts onto a stub, and that stub is part of the hull, and it's still very strong. It's a good way to build a boat. But in the modern era of sailboat building, things are done a bit differently on a lot of boats. Not all of them, but a lot. Often called production boats because manufacturers have found ways to make a lot of boats in a short period of time, production style. And one of the ways they keep costs down is in the keel attachment design. And this is a big and very important thing to know if you own a production style of boat. This all reminds me of when I was a kid and my dad was explaining cars to me. It's his fault I relate everything back to cars. In his day, cars were all frame on and built like tanks, so a little fender bender just bent the bumper. But cars built when I was growing up are unibody or monocoque, so they don't have a frame and instead have crumple zones. And in a fender bender, they crumple up like tin cans to protect the passengers. But that means an accident usually writes them off. And that's a good analogy for the way boats have changed. The big, heavy Carl Alberg boats could take a lot of groundings into some rocks at full speed and nothing would really happen. But a production boat just isn't that strong and sometimes gets totally written off after even one grounding. You see, production boats usually have a flat bottom that the keel bolts to, which isn't strong enough to support the keel alone. So inside the hull, a matrix is built to spread the load of the keel and any stress that comes from sailing. That matrix is much cheaper to make and then glue it in after the hull is built than it would be to build the hull super strong or to put a stub on the bottom like they used to. Cheap and fast is the name of the game. And if you have a boat with a keel matrix, here's what you need to know. I love this old video on YouTube from Sailing Aurora. He has a newer Hanse, and after one grounding event, the keel matrix came unglued from the hull and twisted and cracked and started to come apart, causing even the cabinetry inside the boat to deform and crack. If you have one of these boats, any newer production boat, you definitely should go watch this video. I'll leave a link in the description. It's very enlightening. But suffice it to say, these keel matrix assemblies are built outside the boat and then glued in after. Sometimes they just put a bonding agent on them and stick them down. But in more expensive boats, they also fiberglass the matrix to the hull. In his Hanse in the Sailing Aurora video, it was just glued and never tabbed or bonded beyond the glue. And a lot of boats are like that. He shows us how one grounding sent the matrix up, breaking the bonding agent that glued it down, cracking the matrix in a few places, and compromised his whole boat. His Hanse is being repaired, but from the looks of the video, it is a very big repair. It's been at least a year on the hard at the point where he made the video. If you have one of these production style boats, or maybe if you're helping someone else look at one they might potentially buy, a big important question should be, was the matrix just glued down with a Bondo-like substance, or was it also bonded with extra fiberglass cloth? When they put the bulkheads in boats, they're bonded to the hull with cloth, and we should hope the keel matrix is too, but in many cases, including Sailing Aurora, it was just glued down. Pull up the bilge boards and have a look-see. Every inch of the matrix that you can get to should be inspected. We're looking for any sign that the matrix is separating from the hull. We're looking for stress cracks in the matrix or the bonding agent that glues it down. A lot of these boats were built with a very brittle and inflexible bonding agent that can crack over time and stress. And we're not just talking about boats that were grounded, but also boats that sit on the hard for the off season. There have been a lot of boats that, if stored incorrectly, usually with too much weight on the aft end of the keel, which causes the keel to act as a fulcrum against the hull while the boat sits on the hard, causing damage to the aft section of the keel matrix. Inspecting the keel matrix should be a step on your checklist once a year just to make sure everything is in ship shape. What other maintenance steps do you want us to cover here? Leave a comment below. And also, Practical Sailor is looking for talent, people to write articles or create video content and make some extra cash. If you have something to contribute to the sailing world, we'd love to hear from you over at practical-sailor.com/apply. I'll see you guys next time.